Hello and welcome to the February 21st, 2019 edition of the Gold, Goats, and Gun Short News. My name is Tom Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about, but before we start talking about Russia's newly found financial independence, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So just to remind everybody, we do live streams here on this channel on Monday nights at 8 p.m. and Friday nights at 8:30. Just click the little notification bell in order to, find out when I go live. You can follow my work over on Twitter at TFL1728, as well as over at my blog at tomluongo.me. Links to all that stuff is in the description of the video down below. What I want to talk about today, though, now that we've got that out of the way, let's get on to some of the interesting, or I think, punchy, short, important news of the day. And there's I could do about 6 of these right now, but this one I want to get onto because this is important. And there's 2 reasons for this. The first is that the other day, Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, gave his State of the Nation address, not the State of the Union address, but the State of the Nation address, in which he had addressed a number of issues. And I still haven't had a chance to really watch all of it yet. The video just came out, I think, maybe yesterday, of the full thing. But in that speech, he made headlines by stating that Russia's total debt now is lower on a total basis, that includes government, corporate, and private debt, is lower than its foreign exchange reserves. It's lower than its national savings. So when you stop to think about it in those terms, for all intents and purposes, what Putin is saying is that the real savings, the pool of real savings, if you're thinking like an Austrian economist, is now, of the Russian economy, is now greater than the leverage within that economy. So this is something very close to out of Murray Rothbard's dream of 100% reserve banking. It's not the case, but in an analogous sense, if the Russian monetary system and banking system is gotten less than 1 times gearing, that's phenomenal in a certain way. In this world today, financial gearing is the name of the game, and it is one of the things that allows for people to compete. And part of the reason why there's always this push towards competitive devaluations and levering up credit markets and everything is because everyone else is doing it. Certainly we are here in the United States. And in order to compete on a dollar for dollar basis, for capital, the real capital that the money is supposed to represent, you kind of have to go along to get along, right? At a certain level. And that the Russians that are running such a tight ship in this world of profligate money printing, not saying that the Russians aren't printing money, because they are, but to say that they're able to accumulate savings that undergirds their monetary and banking system to such a degree is tremendous. It's a tremendous achievement given the hostility that the world's reserve currency, that the country that controls the world's reserve currency, the United States, is exhibiting at this point. It's crazy. And it's something that they have to do. And so when you start to tie this, and this, what's really interesting to me is not just this statement by Putin, but now when you start to think about the situation that we're in with gold, and it's not been news, it's not been news that the Russians have been buying gold hand over fist and storing it in their central bank reserves, and that's part of the reason why their foreign exchange reserves are so high. It goes beyond that. So let's break some things down. The finance ministry is now talking about scrapping their value-added tax, their VAT, on gold, which is currently at 20%. Massively retards domestic investment into gold. The Russians also have other problems in terms of creating reserves through the banking system in local currencies, because the ruble carries with it far higher interest rates. Ruble-denominated debt carries far higher interest rates than U.S. dollar-denominated debts. So, and the Russians are in a sense not even encouraged to save in their own currency, because of the volatility of the ruble relative to the dollar is still higher on a yearly basis going backward than the rate of return on a Russian ruble savings account, or even any kind of Russian government bond. So paying that 20% VAT up front to gold on buying gold in order to hold onto your savings, in order to save money, would be a tremendous thing for the Russian people and for Russian society at large, because encouraging people to save in gold, or at least in effect remonetizing gold as a store of value, which is similar to UK and EU policy, right? Would be a tremendous thing, because it would stop the constant trying to arbitrage the Russian ruble versus the euro versus the dollar in order to try and maximize returns. And it's one of the things that really has been hampering the Russian banking system for years. It's something I know that a number of prominent Russian economic figures have complained about. But remember that the Russian government and the Russian central bank and all of it, for years, were stabbed by Western educated neoliberals. And which is still a holdover from the Gorbachev-Yeltsin years that Putin hasn't been able to really purge yet. So the idea that the finance minister is now talking about scrapping the VAT on gold is a major signal that the worm is turning within the Russian financial structure, and certainly within Putin's government and Medvedev's government, in order to finally get control of what effectively has been a fifth column within Russian society for 2 decades now. Certainly the 2 decades that Putin's been in office. So here's some figures for you to give you an idea, right? The Russians only bought 2.8 tons of gold last year in 2018 for investment purposes. The Russian government bought 274 to put in their foreign exchange reserves. Russia's gold output spiked to 307 tons of gold last year, which puts it in the top 2 or 3 in the world. So it had been languishing around the 265, 270 mark every year. So it's really interesting that that's where we are. That demand, if they were to remove the VAT on gold, you would create a structural deficit in the gold market relative to Russia. If the government next year buys another 274 tons of gold, or even if it only buys 250 tons, but you scrap the VAT, and Russian investment demand goes from 3 tons a year to 50 or 100 tons a year, now all of a sudden the Russians are now net consumers of gold on the open market. And I know I read an article stating that was the case in 2018, that at one point the Russians bought more than they produced. I think it was just for the month of December. It was not on an aggregate basis for 2018, that they bought 34 tons in December, but they only produced like 28 tons. So they were actually a net consumer of global gold demand. Now also remember that I'm sure that with the amount of oil that they're selling on the Shanghai exchange now, that they're laundering out their profits off of those oil trades, and what they're not going to hold in yuan, that's part of where the Russians are getting their gold from, right? That they're converting on the Shanghai exchange and then sending it back to Moscow, or holding it in an allocated account for the Bank of Russia locally in Shanghai. So, but understand that the VAT was put in place to do what it's actually done, which is to retard investments so that Russian families and Russian communities don't store wealth. Okay? That their capital is always mobile. And then if you can attack the stability of the currency locally, you can get people to make the rational decision to not hold their savings in that currency. And if you create a 20% barrier to entry into gold, then it's really easy to continually push the everyday Russians into using dollars or euros or some other currency other than the ruble, other than for what they absolutely have to. So yet another neoliberal albatross is in the process of being discarded, and not a moment too soon for the Russian economy. This is if they go through with this, and I don't know that it has to go through the State Duma. I only know that the finance ministry is mulling these ideas over. But if they actually go through with this, which I think they will, because it really truly is in their best interest at this point, now that the Russian government's foreign exchange reserves are high enough and everything is stable enough, now that they've moved to and they've absorbed the chaos of a free-floating ruble on the open market, with an open capital account. Now that they've done that, and they still running a massive trade surplus and still able to accumulate gold reserves, now you can open up gold investment locally, the same way China has, to build wealth now within Russia from the ground up, not just to safeguard the currency. Now the ruble has now been safeguarded. Now it's time to build wealth organically from the ground up, and encouraging investment, encouraging savings in gold is exactly the way you do that. So to me, this is just this is the most obvious thing that needs to be done. If you have any questions about that, leave comments below, and I will get to them. So if you have any other, if you have comments or questions or whatever, leave them below. We'll talk about it that way. So tomorrow night, Friday night, 8:30, we'll be here. I'll probably discuss this and a variety of other issues as well on my live stream. You can also remember Monday nights at 8 o'clock. This has been the Gold, Goats, and Guns short news for February 21st, 2019. Jesus Christ, Thomas. You guys have a great day. Keep your stick on the ice.